Ethiopian Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello, teacher. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson on the history of taxonomy. This is the first lesson of our new unit on classification. Throughout this unit, we will learn about the principles of classification and the 5 kingdoms. In this lesson, we will be learning about the history of classification and why it is necessary in the field of biology. I hope you are ready to begin, students. Scientists have discovered millions of different living organisms on Earth. Can you imagine studying and trying to understand the lives, patterns, behaviors, and evolution of so many different kinds of organisms? In order to make the task of learning about all of the different organisms easier, scientists classify living things into groups based on how they are the same and how they are different. Students, can you think of reasons why classifying organisms is beneficial?
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Hello again, students. I hope you were able to come up with some ideas as to why it is beneficial to classify organisms. The reasons you could have given are: classification makes the study of living organisms convenient. It helps in the specific identification of any given organism. The study of a few types from each distinct group help to link the idea of life as a whole. It reveals the relationships among various groups of organisms. Classification provides information about plants and animals, and it shows the evolutionary relationship by establishing the gradually increasing complexity in the different groups of organisms. For example, we can distinguish between the many varieties of butterflies, or we can determine the evolutionary ancestors for elephants. The technique of classifying living organisms is known as taxonomy. This system of taxonomy groups living things into categories called taxa. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle initiated the process of taxonomy. He started to create a classification system for all the living organisms by grouping animals together. He grouped them by similarities, such as those animals that live on land and those that live in water. Aristotle thought some animals were higher up in the order of nature. Humans, which he called rational animals, were at the top of this order. Aristotle may have introduced the idea of classifying organisms, but it was Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus who was the most well-known taxonomist. Linnaeus compared, contrasted, and listed types of organisms starting in his childhood. He started his first botanical listing at age 8. For many years, he gathered so much information about organisms that he published a book called Systema Naturae. He suggested a way of categorizing living organisms with a binomial naming system that is still used today. Binomial means two names. The two names of the organism are expressed in Latin. For example, the binomial name for a dog would be Cani familiaris. Although Latin is no longer a language that is spoken regularly, scholars from all over the world who speak many different languages will understand the terms used in Linnaeus's classification. Students, can you think of reasons why it is important to have a system of classifying organisms that can be understood by people in all countries who speak different languages? Take a few minutes to write down your reasoning.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, students. Were you able to draw a few conclusions about using the language of Latin to classify organisms? Since there are so many different languages spoken worldwide, it would be very challenging to have a harmonized understanding of all the organisms that existed without causing confusion. People in different countries would have many different names for the same animal, and this could create misunderstanding. Latin is used so that all scientists and scholars will be able to understand the naming system of all organisms. According to Linnaeus, the main taxonomic categories are kingdom, phylum, or division for plants, class, order, family, genus, and species. This is the accepted way in which organisms are classified. Kingdoms are the largest and the most general group in which organisms can be classified. Species is the smallest, most specific group of classification. We begin by sorting organisms based on general characteristics, such as whether the organism is a plant or an animal. We continue to name the organism based on other features as we work our way down the list. Once the organism reaches the category of species, it is narrowed down to a precise name and specific set of features that differentiates it from other organisms. We will learn more about how organisms are named and classified in our future lessons. students. For our final activity, you will classify organisms based on similarities. Look at the images of the different organisms on the screen. Divide the organisms based on their similarities. Write down the name of the organism in a list. List the characteristic that is similar between the organisms.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Well done, students. Did you enjoy that activity? I hope you were able to see similarities between some of these organisms. When we are finished our lesson today, review your lists with teacher and the other classmates. Compare your lists and discuss why you chose to classify the organisms in the way you did. That brings us to the end of our lesson, students. To review, we were introduced to taxonomy, which is a process of classifying living organisms. We learned how taxonomy helps us organize the information we know about organisms. And we learned why Latin is used as the language in taxonomy. We also learned about the history of organism classification, particularly the contributions of Carl Linnaeus. Until next time, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.